Start the recording. All right. Nicholas, do you want to maybe I guess set the stage for like some of these proposed improvements that we're considering?
Yes, thank you, Steve. That's a good idea. So we started already in the last meeting, which is actually a while ago, to integrate some updates to the certificate properties, since that is of interest for a lot of banks related to the DORA regulations, but not only. Yeah, the idea was to actually have people from that domain part of the meeting to really discuss those things, because yeah, I like a little bit of background in the area of DORA compliance, so it would be great if we can discuss those improvements here and see how we can incorporate that in the standard. And that's why it's great that Juan is here today. So he did a lot of work there actually in the area and improved that, and they also open source the extension. And I think the idea would be in this meeting to see how we can take it just like it is integrated, or if there's some discussions around how it should be integrated in the overall standard, kind of
Okay.
the idea of the standard to do that.
All right.
here.
So do you have something to share, or how do you want to proceed?
So I can just quickly show what we did last time and what we already added to the PR. There's a PR currently in the specification repo that's called Cryptography Working Group, where I added the changes from the last meeting. And those are basically, let me just quickly share that. Those are basically headed diff here somehow. There. We added the serial number, but there was some open to do because we were unsure about the regex that was part of the data model from Santander, if that's kind of exhaustive, or yeah, if it fits basically. And the other thing we added was the fingerprint. Those are the changes we were quite sure we could add to the new version. But I think there were some other things in the meantime that Johan added that we should also discuss to add here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, I brought some things that I can share. So maybe
yes, go ahead. It's a good idea.
Okay, I'm not used to Zoom, sorry. Okay, I think you can see my screen right now, PPT.
Yes.
Okay, so, well, during our sessions, we made a lot of decisions, and what we have seen is that maybe CBOM can be improved in some ways. So we requested some of that improvements during those sessions. And well, I can share again or explain a little bit more about those suggestions. Of course, this is from our perspective, so maybe they don't make sense, but well, let's try. I think that the most important is that right now the extended properties must be defined inside an array of elements, one property per item. This means that you cannot validate if some of that items are mandatory or not. Or at least I think there is no way of indicating that an array has to contain certain specific items in a JSON schema. So if we were able to create objects inside values instead of strings, we would be able to create a complete set of rules for those objects, including the validation for the required values or not. For example, here what I'm sharing here is an example where the value is an object instead of a string. And we can, for this object, we can define our own schema, saying that inside this value, there's only one required property. In this case, there's the subject alternative name, for example, and the other ones are not. The way it is defined right now makes us put all these elements in a list of items in an array, and you can't put rules to those items. So we think it would be very beneficial to be able to define these values for extended properties that are not inside the schema as complete objects for this reason.
So when you talk about the array, you mean the properties section in the component, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the alternative name makes a lot of sense.
This is just an example. I mean,
okay.
Here we're talking about the definition of the value for extended properties that right now in CycloneDX objects is are strings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you try to define something like this, it does not work. It does not validate as a CycloneDX schema. So we think it would be very interesting to be able to define these elements instead of strings as objects, as complete objects. Also, we think it would be it would permit a more semantic definition because defining every extended property inside the same list of items puts at the same level things that maybe make more sense if they were grouped in different objects. For example, instead of this, in the left, where all the items are at the same level, we could be able to define something like this, where you have management dates with a note inside management dates have an object instead of a string with all of the dates that are needed, and it will be more it would have more meaning. The object, the final object would have more meaning from our perspective.
So just understanding question from my side, but it's more a general one, I guess. So I think there was, when I recall correctly, there was a reason for the schema to not be extendable at points. I think from a strategic point of view that is there because of validation or security that you can't just add things to the schema and validate, Steve? Is that
That's right. Yeah, it's a non-starter for the DoD if to have a non-hardened JSON schema. So we need JSON schema, unfortunately, is not extensible by design, right? It is not an extensible markup language like XML is. Which means that if you want to extend it, there's some really odd workarounds that you need to do. And the path that we have chosen is to use these things called properties, which are name value pairs. And there is a namespace for the names. There's an optional namespace that people can register. So there's top level companies, there's ecosystems that have registered their own, top level namespace. So essentially you have like things like, Maven colon, and then, the name of the property, or NPM colon, or Python colon, or, GitLab colon, right? So that's kind of how we work around the fact that we need a hardened schema and we still need to make it extensible. We do that in a way that is serialization format agnostic. So the exact same properties and namespace for those properties work for JSON, XML, and protobuf, which are the 3 serialization formats that we support. So that's kind of our dilemma right there. We need a hardened schema. I cannot have a part of the schema that's not that you can just add values to. That can't be allowed, unfortunately.
Okay.
If we want to, now I look at these management dates as more of an operational thing. Now, there has been some talk about, we already support OBOM, which is Operational Bill of Material, and it basically complements an SBOM. It allows you to represent the entire stack, not just the software that's running, but the whole thing, the operating system, the hardware, the configurations, everything. But there's no part of the spec that actually has like operational aspects to it, like what you would see in like ITOM, for example. Now there is an opportunity to work on that and do so in a way where it's not specific to cryptography. For example, right, these management dates for cryptography are nice, but we basically have users with a similar requirement for when was the software installed, when was it patched last, all these other things that are also operational. So we might want to back up and think about, how we can represent all these different operational aspects, not just a cryptography, in a uniform way. All right, let's see what else you have.
Okay. Well, I gave here another example about what I was talking before. Here we had to do some ugly things, defining, for example, for the basic constraint CA value, having this, we know this can be a Boolean value that can be true or false, and having this defined as a string makes us validate it as an enumerable with the true and the false value as a string. So it's another example of why what I was explaining before would be interesting. But well, I understood.
I mean, I think just at this point, that's the idea, I guess, also of the current working group. So if there are things that we want to just that are meaningful in general, not just for maybe the Santander company specific, but in general useful for certificate management, this is a way to add it to the actual certificate properties. So that's basically how we could add that as a value type basically to the standard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, this one is another general suggestion. We have seen that you have defined the fingerprint as a new property of the certificate of kind hash, which is nice. However, we think that our request of adding an attribute to CBOM hashes still makes sense for other cases. Right now, the hash is defined like here in the screen, except for the line with the label. You have the algorithm and the content. We think that adding a property, a label property or name or something that can permit to tag the hash somehow would make sense to define the hash as different kind of elements. In this kind of fingerprint, and in other cases could be something different.
Got it. So this is like what the hash is about.
Yeah.
A hash of what?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. All right. That makes a lot of sense. That's an easy win. Do we have essentially, I mean, you propose some structural changes, which is fine. However, taking a step back, do you have like a list of different types of data that cannot currently be represented in CycloneDX that you would like to be represented in CycloneDX?
Mm, uh, not really. We managed to represent everything that we wanted, I think. Mm,
Well, some of the extended like certificate properties, for example, that was on the first slide, right? I think that's an example of things that, I mean, at least I don't believe the subject alternate name is something that we support today, Nicholas. Correct me if I'm wrong.
So we took a shortcut, or maybe we did in the beginning, because we have basically the subject name as a value, and in the examples, so in the authoritative guide, it's basically the whole string, which includes the country and alternative name and all that
Right.
stuff. We can split that into an object if it's of interest. We just took a shortcut there and just have it as one string.
Right.
yeah, but the alternative name is an extended property, and I think I heard in the last recording, that Navneet was saying that there were some extended properties that were mandatory. I was not aware of that, so I think, and I didn't have the time to check the RFC, but it would be worth to check it to see which of the extended properties are mandatory for every certificate, to at least have those ones represented in the core CBOM.
Yes. So from my side, I can't recall actually which of those are, but I think from the schema perspective, they are all basically optional. So, but you meant in the sense of your use case where they are mandatory, or?
No, we mean mandatory to be valid as a certificate for a PKI.
Okay. And you mean every value, or do you refer that to the states of a certificate, or?
No. I was talking about the extended properties in particular. Navneet said that some of those extended properties were defined as mandatory in the RFC for certificates. And
I see.
I think that should be represented as well in CBOM.
So the values, because I think the requirement we can't represent, if I'm correct, because from the standard perspective, there's just minor field, or just few fields are mandatory. And I think that should be like that, Steve, if I'm correct, or could be also when we add certificate properties where we say like things are mandatory.
Yeah, I mean, we can have like on a per property basis, as you know, I mean, we can specify what's mandatory and what's not. We also need to take in consideration, however, that there's a lot of different types of certificates. And while it might be mandatory in one type of certificate, it may not be mandatory in another type. So you end up with a least common denominator type of situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's another thing that we saw in the recorded session. You were talking about different kind of certificates other than X509, and you were talking about PEM and DER as they were different kind of certificates, and that's not correct. PEM and DER, for example, are different kind of encodings for X509 certificates. The only different kind of certificate that we can think of is CBC. We don't use, as far as I know, we don't use CBC for nothing. And I was looking for information, and I could not really find information about this kind of certificates in any RFC, but I think absolutely it's worth investigating those kind of certificates to understand what properties make sense for those, and what properties maybe they are they have such differences that maybe it would make more sense to have a different kind of object, for example, for this kind of certificates. I really don't know because I don't know this kind of certificates. But yes, at least this kind of certificates I think should be taken into account in CBOM.
Yeah.
But in our case, we were talking about X509 all the time. Independently of how it was encoded, we were talking about X509.
Okay. So I put that actually in the as a to do in the current kind of in the 1.7 branch version where we add the other properties too. So kind of that we have a track that we should figure that out. Looking at the different types of certificate and then figure out which properties are mandatory. I also added now the label part to the hash. Is that okay? Otherwise, let me know. Would be then committed to the same PR. So from my point of view, so there's still the open thing with your serial number and the regex. If we could have a look at that, it would be great. And then from there, I think we also had the different types of state for certificate, I think, which could also be added to the certificate properties. But I think also in the meantime, you added some more things where I didn't follow it all the way to the end, basically. So if there are other things we should discuss here, I think that we could and should do that.
I'm fine with that.
The hash thing for the label, why don't you create a separate, well, yeah, include it on this PR.
Okay.
I might just have some explaining to do, but that's fine. Just include it on this one.
Okay.
Do we know that all the certificates are going to have the same serial number format?
I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean,
Yeah.
we can, outside of format, I mean, it really depends on how granular you want to get with your regex, right? We get fairly granular with like the hashes, I believe, right? We account for different lengths of hashes and the types of characters. But if we really don't know the length of the serial number, or it might vary based on, you know, where the dashes appear or that sort of thing, we can always limit it to, you know, the types of characters that are allowed, and that's basically it.
I think, in fact, I know that in X509 it is defined as a 20 bytes number, and it's usually represented as a 40 character string, or 40, or if it's split with dashes or something, it's 60, I think. But internally, it's a 20 bytes number. For X509, we're talking about X509.
Right. You know, we got like PGP and a bunch of other things as well. I don't even know if serial numbers are a thing in PGP. I haven't used it in a really long time. So we may have to do some investigation to see if all the certificate types are basically going to have the same serial number format. So that'll be a little bit of research for the group. Now, right now, Nicholas, you've got a to-do on the to validate that.
Yes, I just looked at it.
What's that?
I just looked at it in the code, so I just thought.
Yeah, I'm looking at it too. So, yeah. So it looks like, other than that, I mean, you did some cleanup and adding, you know, just some periods and stuff that we're missing and stuff like that, which is fine. You've added the fingerprint, which I think is good. And then the fingerprint is then going to use, in this case, would then use the optional label property. So that makes sense.
Yep.
Now it looks like you have fingerprint in, it looks like you have fingerprint in here twice, but it looks like they're on different objects. But from the GitHub view, I can't tell what objects the fingerprint is part of.
Yes,
other
so
one.
yeah, one is for the certificate and the other is for the key object. Or
Okay.
for related crypto materials. So because I think we discussed in the last meeting that there is or could be a need to represent the fingerprint of a key or signature or something or other asset also using a hash.
Right.
And specifying the algorithm. Because first we thought in the beginning that this could be just the value basically. There is for the related crypto materials, there is I think a value or yes, a value object. But the problem there is if you do it with a hash, you don't have the algorithm. So that makes it hard to validate or to,
Yeah.
So it could be a value if it's not hashed, but if you would want to do a hash, then it may be useful to use a fingerprint.
Okay, that makes sense. Yep. All right. All right. So, Nicholas, are you going to, or somebody at IBM, are you guys going to do the research on the serial number?
Yeah, I will ask Nevenese because he is basically an expert on certificates. I hope he can figure that out. Yeah.
Okay. And what about some of the other types of data that Juan is trying to represent, excluding some of the operational things? Can we support some of the other types of data that he wants to represent?
Yeah, that's basically my question. If you can go through that, because I don't have, or I can also open the GitHub repo of your extensions one, but I don't know if I look at the right place because I have more than one file in there. So
no, I can if you want I can share. Maybe we can jump to the status, for example, for the certificates. As the first step. We have seen that you already have a property for the status in the related crypto materials section. But the problem of this state or this status definition is that it meets key states according to NIST, which we think is slightly different from the states needed for certificates. In particular, it has the compromised state, which we think that differs from our revoked state, because a compromised state immediately means that there's a security concern, likely, while a revocation can be done also for administrative reasons, for example. And the certificate has to be treated different if it was revoked for a security reason or for an administrative reason. So this is why we differed from the state. We didn't use the states defined in the related crypto material section, and we defined our own states. So I don't know if it makes sense for you to add a state property or status property for certificates, taking into account this. But the problem is that we couldn't find any how to say, any definition from NIST for states for certificates. We could only find states for keys.
okay. Yeah. Yeah, right. That's the one. Yes, I think we had this discussion. I don't know if it was last time or where I tried to wait, let me quickly share. Yeah, this one. Yes. So yes, and I think
Yeah,
mean,
this is what I was talking about. Here there's a compromise. About rather than the compromise state, everything is more or less the same. But we differ in the compromised state because for us, compromise means a security concern. It's more let's say semantic difference. So for us, instead of compromise, we define a revoked state and a revocation reason. To difference between a revocation because of security problem or a revocation because of administrative reasons.
mhm. Yes, I mean that's a good point. Yeah, I'm wondering because so I think it's good to have those states also in the certificate represented for certificate lifecycle management. That's the thing that you try to achieve. And since we both couldn't find basically a better standard than the thing that NIST has here for keys or key management, which is also related to certificate, but it's not 100% mapping. I don't know if we want to add then that basically with the change in revocation to the standard to the schema. From my point of view, it would be fine, but I know that we normally just align with standards or try to align with standards in that area. Steve, do you have an opinion if it's should do more research, or do you think that this basically validation from two sides is fine, that there is currently none really, and we derive it from here, from the key management?
So we are talking about adding a new state. Is that what it is?
Yes, so basically the capability in the certificate properties to assign a state of the certificate. So if it is active, suspended, deactivated, destroyed.
Right. Yeah, right now it's in related crypto material.
Yes. Yes. But there, I think it's not 100% aligned, isn't it?
Yeah, it follows 857.
Okay. So it's, which is this then? 800. Oh no, okay, this is from 857 too. Is there a different state because from the naming?
No, these are the states that, yeah. So Cyclone supports, I'm looking at the enum right now, pre-activation, active, suspended, deactivated, compromised, and destroyed.
And where are those in?
It's in related crypto material properties. There's a property in there called state.
There. Yeah. Okay. Now I see it. Yeah.
Yeah, we have seen that, but the thing is that what I was saying, that compromised is means there's a security concern, and we added a revocation state, a revoked state, because you can revoke of security concerns or for administrative reasons. So that's the point. I don't know if it makes sense adding a state to related crypto material or adding a different state to the certificate. That's that part I cannot say, but what we needed is a different state, another state. So having that we do not have the state here, we defined our own state for the certificate.
So you're saying revoked, and do you also use suspended or no?
Yes.
Okay, so revoked and suspended in your world are different things.
Revoked and compromised, I guess.
You've revoked and compromised. That's it.
Okay.
Now, the thing is that we do not use compromised. We use all these states, but we changed compromised for revoked because revocation needs a reason for revocation. Compromised means that there's a security concern.
I mean, for me, the question is if we want to. So since I assumed it because we did some research there, and I think you also said that one that there is no standard naming for those states in terms of certificates, just in terms of keys. If when we think about adding it to the certificate, if we then, do some adaptation here and change, for example, compromise to revocation or revoke, because I think revoke is a thing that is common in the certificate lifecycle from a terminology perspective. But my concern is that it would be great if there's a standard that says how it's named, basically.
That we think the same, and well, I have to say that we're going to talk to NIST to try to validate as well our model to see if it makes sense for them, and well, maybe after that conversations something goes out, but right now we couldn't find anything supporting this change.
Do we want to consider? So this is obviously a NIST model. NIST by charter is a standards organization. And we're not aware of any other standards that really, specify the life cycle of key management. Do we want to, Nicholas, consider adding support for custom life cycles, similar to how we do with in the metadata life cycles thing, where you can either use the pre-canned life cycles or you can create your own. Now, if you create your own, right, nobody's going to really know what that is because it doesn't have a definition. So if you go to metadata lifecycle, you can choose either a predefined phase or you can specify a custom phase.
Nice.
And you could theoretically do a similar pattern for state where you could specify the NIST phases, or you could specify a custom phase. Now, again, if you use the custom phases, I don't know what those words mean. And in fact, they may not even be English words, right? They might be whatever.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea. Just a question to this one here, to the structure. Is there a possibility to extend a phase object? So is it just a string currently, or could we also make an object on? Because I think for the lifecycle management, especially in the case of revocation, and I think Juan also you said that, to be able to add a reason, for example, in this to the state would be a great thing, but then it has to be an object and not just a string, basically, on enum.
Right. We could theoretically, I mean, unfortunately, we currently have this thing called state in related crypto materials, and that thing cannot change, right? Because otherwise we break backward compatibility.
Right.
So we're not going to be able to basically do the exact same thing that we're doing in life cycles. However, we could have an option of either using state or custom state, one or the other, not both. And then that custom state could in fact be an object where he can specify the custom state, what it is, and then the reason.
Yeah, so it's good
that's
to me.
an option.
I mean, yeah, but just the suggestion with the object and the reason, like being able to add the reason, but I don't know if that's actually a use case. So it would be great if you can just verify one if that would be useful for yourself.
Yeah, I think it will be useful. I think well, I need to see
because otherwise you don't have to make it that complicated if there's no use case to add those reasons. But
let me try to represent that for the next meeting, and yeah, maybe I think in the beginning it sounds great. Looks like it would be a valid solution.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
were added to do to the current that we add a
You want
custom
to
state.
are you going to prototype that, Nicholas? So
Yes, I would.
you can
just
do
that.
either state or custom state, but not both.
Yes, I would look in the example of the metadata lifecycle and try to make sense of how to do it. I think that should be
Okay. All right. Very good.
nice.
I think that will work, and then we'll have Juan just kind of validate that what we think is actually going to work.
Yeah.
All right. Now, do we also need to support that state property in other things other than related crypto material?
In certificate, I guess then. But other than that, it's a good question. I don't think so. But we have protocols, but I don't think there's a life cycle algorithms.
No.
So yeah.
No, because the protocols are going to always go back to the certificate anyway.
Yeah.
Algorithms, no. Yeah, I think just certificate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice. Good thing.
I'm checking my notes. I think from our side, well, there are all the extended properties that I don't know if finally you agree to add those properties in Seaborn, but we added them as well in our own schema. And I'm talking about basic constraints, key usage, extended key usage, subject alternative name, the authority key identifier. All those properties are not right now.
You want to mock that up in terms of like adding that to the actual spec, Nicholas?
Yeah, I mean, that was basically the reason why I asked who wanted to join, because for myself, just looking at the JSON in your repo, I wasn't able to understand the use case basically and couldn't figure out if that's a specific Santander basically use case or if we could kind of abstract it for a general use case. Couldn't just make it from the JSON definition. So it would be great if we can go through and understand what you envision with those values, so we can then figure out if that's a general use case or not.
Right.
And
so is that something that you can prepare for the next session, Juan? Just coming up with a list of like all the different types of data and like a description and how you're going to be using it, so we can understand if that's a general use case, and if so, we can just add it to the core spec.
Yeah, I can, but I mean, extended properties. I don't know if you have worked with certificates, but these are properties that are in all X509 certificates all around the world. So it's general use case, I think.
Okay.
Okay. Sometimes then I misunderstood that. So you mean external properties in the certificate, but not like not for the schema.
I wanted to
Gotcha. Okay.
The properties in the certificate, yes.
The interesting thing about standards is that naming is hard.
Yeah. I see.
What is the proper noun to use? What is Yes. We struggle with that quite a bit. I know, Nicholas, we struggle with that with the crypto stuff. When IBM was helping us with some of the machine learning and for the formulation, again, coming up with the correct nouns is really difficult.
So naming is the hardest thing in programming, software engineering. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. So these are X509 properties.
Sorry, 1 second, please. I need to pick the phone.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe then question, Steve. In general, is that how detailed do we want to go with those properties? Do you think it makes sense to add those? Because I think we concluded some back then when we talked about curves, for example, where there was this repo with this JSON schema about how curves actually are defined with all the mathematical stuff. I wasn't sure if, is it same level of details, if it should be in the same standard, or is it an external reference?
Yeah, the interesting thing about, I think the difference between the curve names versus the X509 properties is that the X509 properties are actually ratified in a standard, right? A single standard that is the authoritative source of truth versus the curve names, which exist in multiple standards and papers, essentially.
Yes. Yeah,
So,
no, I meant more from the detailed perspective. If that's something you think that the CBOM, basically from the use case perspective, should aim to capture those detailed things. I mean, otherwise we could also think of adding, as I said, the mathematical parts of the elliptic curve, not the naming. I mean, more the mathematical part. But then we blow up the CBOM part a lot, or how the algorithm, what parameters are used in the algorithm. You know what I mean? Where is the level of details that we aim for from CBOM?
right. So are you asking whether or not, are we going back to that conversation we had a year ago where we're trying to figure out if do we represent the name of the curve or do we have more of a static type like an enum? Is that the question?
It's more like it goes in the direction, but it's more like do we just basically just have the name on? Do we end our standard or our CBOM level of representation there, or do we go full detailed into the mathematical part that we want and could represent? So basically, where we aim from a detailed perspective with CBOM.
Okay, understood. Right. Well, I mean, I think ultimately you need to think of that consumer use case, right? As a consumer, if you consume an SBOM, is the typical consumer going to know how to figure out the math part? I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I wouldn't because, not my strong suit. But the math can be derived from the curve name. Now, whether or not we want to actually explicitly define that the math is right. So that's the question.
Yes, basically yes. So and now this translated to the certificate properties, to the how detailed we want to go there.
I think there is a use case for this, and it's probably not what you're thinking of. But if I'm a research organization like IBM, and I want to communicate, hey, I have this new curve that nobody else knows about, and here's the math part, and be able to represent that in a machine readable way, in addition to maybe research papers that are published, you could theoretically assert that math, all those other details, right?
Yeah.
That would be an interesting use case. So more for about like researchers out to the rest of the world versus like, typical software company like consuming a CBOM, right? I don't think the math part is going to be overly useful.
It would be an interesting use case to explore, like using maybe CBOM or a later version of CBOM to represent standard algorithms, like how they are standardized from a value perspective, like standard schema, basically.
Right.
Interesting.
Exactly. Okay.
Good point.
Not something for 1.7. I think that's a little bit wider in scope than what we have capacity for. But yeah, let's why don't you create an issue for that so that we can at least capture that and start exploring it?
Yep, I will do. Good point.
And I think there's still an opportunity. I think there's still an opportunity to kind of figure out, does TC54, for example, want to be an authoritative source of all the curve names? For example, I mean, that's something theoretically we could take on, and we could actually create a standard. Here's all the curves as of 1.0 of this standard, right? I mean, that's something theoretically that we could do. Because right now, all those curve names is from that one university whose name escapes me right now.
Yes, it's a good source.
Yeah, no kidding. scary how many
Yes.
of them there are.
Yes, crazy. Okay, so I think then maybe for the next meeting we can, I think, Juan, if you could just share or ping me basically where in the Git repo I can find the external properties. I think I can already go through them before the next meeting, and then we can just maybe going through. But I think if it's standardized by the X509, we can just add them. It's just a question of how we want to add it. If it's just on the same level, or do we want to capsulate it a little bit? But I think, yeah.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Nice.
Well, very good. Good call today. So very productive. Thank you for joining, Juan. Arjen, thank you as well. So yeah, looking forward to seeing that PR being updated, Nicholas. I'll take a look at it. I get just FYI, I get so many GitHub notifications that it's really difficult to manage, and github.com/notifications doesn't really help all that much. So if you need me to look at something, just ping me on Slack. It's just easier.
I'll do. Perfect. Thanks for that up.
All right. Yeah.
All right.
No kidding. Cheers.
Cheers.
Have a great day.
Very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.